Rainbow Lorikeet is probably unique in the fact that it has a very wide distribution. It covers a very large area from as far as Bali all the way through into the New Hebrides and down into New Caledonia, then of course Australia. It's an extremely colourful bird, and the variety of subspecies that are found within it is extremely interesting.
They're quite a boisterous, fun-loving animal, so they spend a lot of time playing with one another. They get bored quite easily, so it's quite important to give them as many different sorts of toy type things that you can. By that I mean flowers and plants and more natural sorts of toys, things that they'd play with in the wild rather than human toys. But it is very important to keep them occupied. If they become bored, they can pluck their feathers and develop behavioural problems.
Rainbow lorikeets, they make great pets. They're real clowns, but they're also really dominant birds, and we see lots of behavioural problems with lorikeets, with aggression and disobedience. That's probably the big thing. So training them at an early age to have control over them is really important.
You've got to spend half an hour every day with a pet bird. Hand reared is probably the best way to go, but not necessarily the way to go. You can also buy birds out of the nest and they'll tame down just as good as any other pet bird.
When you buy the bird, it could be a good idea to take it to an avian vet as a checkup. Let the avian vet have a look at the bird and maybe treat it for worms or whatever he might feel that the bird may need to have. See that the bird is taken care of that way. Give it adequate accommodation. Make sure that your bird gets exercise.
You're going to seek out an avian veterinarian for what we call a new bird check. A lot of the birds that we see are coming in at probably 6 to 10 years of age, and they're coming in because of poor management or disease, and just feeding a bird properly will give it a much longer life. These birds should live in excess of 20 years.
My favourite bird is the lorikeet, be it Australian or exotic. They just have so much character over everything else.
A lorikeet's a very active bird. It needs to be able to fly around, it needs to be able to do things. So if it's in a small cage, it's probably not going to get the chance to fly. So every now and then, probably once a day, you should let it out of the cage and let it fly around the room. Now people do things like wing clipping and stuff, so it's not able to.
He should be able to glide maybe 4 or 5 metres and land on his feet. And so the trim, there's lots of different techniques. Probably our preferred technique is to leave 2 feathers on the outside, then cut the next 13 feathers really short. But on some birds we'll do a bilateral trim on 2 wings, where we'll take the last 4 or 5 primary feathers off each wing.
If that bird has got no other bird to play around with, it's going to expect getting social interaction from you, the owner.
Spoil them, and they're the biggest sooks. You can teach them to talk, you can teach them to whistle, you can teach them songs, they'll sing songs.
Initially he just said 1 or 2 words, and it was really muffled, because he tries to talk but it's his own way of saying it. So initially it was muffled, but the more he says it, the better it sounds. He's fairly intelligent, so he picks things up quickly.
The other thing that, of course, is particularly interesting about lories and lorikeets is their habits in the wild, the way that they gather food using a brush tongue papillae to actually gather food and that. So that's all part of a rainbow lorikeet, but it's not necessarily just confined to the rainbow lorikeet, it's confined also to the whole group of loridae.
It's not like a parrot that eats seed. You can leave them 2 days, 3 days, they've got plenty of seed. But with the lorikeet it's different. They can't eat seed as such, like hardened seed. They can eat green seed, which would in the wild probably take up 10 to 15% of their diet, and it's soft green seed from flowers. In captivity you've got to feed them every day, you've got to give them clean water every day. They rely on water very heavily.
And then there's lots of all your fruit and veggies, whatever you've got in the fridge, except avocado, which is toxic, and wild foods. We generally recommend a wet mix or a nectar mix and a dry mix as the basic food. Dry mixes don't vary very much with what brand you use, but the wet mixes there's a huge difference. And you should always go for the highest quality wet mix that you can afford. The wet mixes that you use are going to determine how much disease your bird has.
In the wild they'd eat mostly nectar, but they also feed on various fruits and leaves and flowers. We've noted in the last few years that there's a lot of lorikeets coming into the sanctuary. I guess as land clearance occurs, they're losing their homes, and so we've been putting up nest logs to encourage them to have somewhere to sleep while they're here. But we've also been supplementary feeding them as well, particularly through the months where there isn't a great food supply. We've been making up a mixture for them, especially for lorikeets, that will provide them with the nutrition that they miss out on months where there aren't any flowers. And we've also planted a lot of native trees and plants so that when they flower it can provide these birds with a natural native food source.
Fantastic breeders, they're easy to keep. Some people say that they're very hard to keep, but they're not. They're no harder than an ordinary seed eater to keep.
Generally, lories and lorikeets lay 2 eggs. However, in Australia we have a number of species here that belong to the genera Glossopsita. Those particular birds can lay up to 5 eggs. But 2 eggs is the normal.
We do provide a service to the public where people can bring in sick or injured animals, and we do receive quite a lot of lorikeets, so they stay here until they're mended and then we release them back into the wild.
Probably the biggest problems that we see in the wild are 2 viruses. One's called cytosine circovirus, which used to be known as beak and feather disease virus, and the other one's polyoma virus. Now they look the same in the bird. They both result in feather loss, generally to the flight feathers and the tail. And those birds are known as runners. Right? So they jump out of the nest when they're ready to fledge, they don't have any feathers or they lose their feathers soon after, and they run around on the ground because they can't fly. Now, a lot of people bring those birds in because they think they're baby birds that have come out the nest too quickly. The big worry with chlamydia and chlamydiosis is that it's zoonotic, so it can spread to people. And when we have really intimate contact with our birds, where they're sitting on our shoulder or on our hands, sharing food from our mouth, there's a high risk to people if their birds have got chlamydia. Yeah. Now, those birds can look really healthy and they can carry it in their system for years without actually displaying signs of disease. But if those birds are stressed in any way, whether that's nutritional stress, heat stress, cold stress, fears, overcrowding or disease, the organism can actually activate and start causing disease. It can also cause gastroenteritis, neurological signs associated with the brain and the spinal cord, or it can cause sudden death without any signs at all.
As human beings, we should be concerned about nature and what's happening to it. And we should be really contributing to it if we can in some way. You know, we are these super species. We are the people that can control that.